Looking at Western Canadian teams, we're going to play floor to ceiling with our NHL analyst, Frankie Corrado. So let's start with Elias Pettersson. He has the 5th highest AAV next season. Frankie, his ceiling is top 5 player in the NHL. His floor is underperforming his contract. Do you think he's closer to the ceiling or floor?
Well, just based on the default factor that the top 5 players in the NHL are very solidified, he is closer to the floor. And that's not an indictment on Elias Pettersson. Yes, he has to play better in the playoffs. Yes, he has to be close to a 100-point player in the regular season. But think about that top 5. Everyone can name it. It's McDavid, it's Makar, it's McKinnon, it's Draisaitl, it's Matthews. You can throw Kucherov in there. Like, yeah, we can argue about the order, but there's just no way that Elias Pettersson is making his way into that top 5 players in the NHL category. So because of that, he's closer to the floor.
Oh, okay. Now, Zach Hyman scored 54 goals last year. Ceiling, he's a 50-goal guy again. The floor, he's more of a 30-goal guy. Closer to the ceiling or floor?
I hate to be a buzzkill on this, but Zach Hyman is closer to the floor of 30 goals. And you just think about all the different factors that can happen in a season. Let's say Connor McDavid gets hurt, and all of a sudden he's not playing with him. Let's say Zach Hyman gets hurt, and he's not able to play. He probably is more closer to a 30-goal player, but I wouldn't be surprised if for the next few seasons, Zach Hyman is a 40-plus goal player. But there's just too many variables, too many things that could go wrong, and 50 goals, very difficult to do in the NHL year after year after year. We see it where guys score 50 or 52, and the next year they kind of come back to more their regular goal-scoring pace. Maybe that's the case for Zach Hyman. Maybe it isn't, but I see him closer to the floor at 30 than I do the ceiling at 50 on a regular season basis.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. 50 goals is really tough. Now, the Flames ceiling is a playoff berth. The floor is the worst team in Canada. Is Calgary closer to the ceiling or floor? Please say ceiling.
We have to throw Calgary a bone here. We are going to say ceiling. Yes, of course, the Calgary Flames, it's been well documented. There's been a lot of good players that have walked out the door for that team. But you know there's a lot of good players that still remain. On the back end, you're still going to have Mackenzie Weegar, Rasmus Andersson. You're still going to have Nazem Kadri, Jonathan Huberdeau. Connor Zary took a big step last year as he kind of made his way into the league. And you've added Anthony Mantha. So there are good players on this team that aren't necessarily going to allow this team to be the worst team in Canada, to be one of the basement dwellers. We'll see what direction, ultimately the team starts off in. But you have to take a look out east and say, what's Montreal going to be like? What's Ottawa going to be like? I think at the end of the day, the Calgary Flames are closer to a playoff team. They're not a playoff team, but they're closer to a playoff team than they are the worst team in Canada.
Okay, I can buy that. And in Winnipeg 2 years ago, Mark Scheifele had 42 goals. Last year, he had 25. So if 42's the ceiling, 25's the floor, is he closer to ceiling or floor?
He is closer to the ceiling, but it's up to him to prove that on any given year. Yes, 42 goals a couple seasons ago. Mark Scheifele should be a 35-goal guy every single year. He's that skilled. And at one point, you go back 7 or 8 years, I think Mark Scheifele was in that conversation of young players that were going to take the next step and become, the top 10, 15 players, the top centermen in the NHL, especially the top Canadian centermen in the NHL. So Mark Scheifele is well within that, being a 35 to 40, 42 goal guy. He shouldn't be closer to the floor. So for those reasons, because he's capable of doing it, he's going to have to drive himself there, but he is closer to the ceiling at 42 than he is the floor.
Okay, that's another edition of Ceiling or Floor with Frankie Corrado.